if you are someone who genuinely says that, like, the CIA, for all of its faults, ultimately does good, how can you not love the CIA? That means that you are someone who genuinely believes that America should continue to be the world superpower that is going to, unfortunately, have to suppress and or oppress other countries and the people who live in those countries, and democracy itself for the good of America. And be honest about that.
It's 12:14, breaking news. If you are going to be heading out southwest on I-71, take a note. A part of I-71 is shut down because of what law enforcement is calling a critical incident. Police in Clinton County, the sheriff's office there, they've exchanged some gunfire with a man who reportedly tried to get inside of the FBI Cincinnati field office and led police on a chase. What we have here is a live look for you now. You can see how deserted that area is. This is just northwest of Wilmington. We were on the phone with the FBI spokesperson.
Just want to see this ghost truck because it appeared out of nowhere.
What we have here is a live look for you now.
Look at that.
What we have here is a live look for you now. You can.
America now has ghost trucks. It's been confirmed.
See how deserted that area is. This is just northwest of Wilmington. We were on the phone with the FBI spokesperson about 10 minutes ago, and he tells us there is no concern with the Columbus field office at this time. 10 TV's Lacey Crisp is headed to the scene, and she'll have an update on later editions of our news, and of course on that 10 TV News app, and she'll be live.
Okay, I just wanted to see the ghost truck, but let's learn what's happening.
Hello, I'm Deirdre Bolton. We do have breaking news to bring you right now. Authorities in Ohio in a standoff with a man they say tried to break into the FBI Cincinnati office. So you're looking at live images from that scene right now. You can see somebody directing traffic there. We have learned, by the way, that the suspect has been contained in a cornfield nearby, basically off an interstate near Wilmington, Ohio. So authorities are set to hold a news conference with more information. You are looking at where we will be getting more information from those local authorities. We will obviously bring you there live as soon as that happens. In the meantime, ABC News senior investigative reporter Aaron Kurtaski right beside me, keeping me company through this. So this is somewhat bizarre, I think we have to say, possibility here. We have a man whom we know from local authorities has tried to break into this FBI office in Ohio. We know he is still in a cornfield. What else do we know?
Well, this all started at the FBI office in Cincinnati, where they said that the man brandished a nail gun as he tried to break into this office.
A nail gun? Are you serious? Okay, so for those of you who haven't worked in construction, nail guns, as a safety procedure, have a little valve on the very front of them. That valve you have to push down so it knows that you're now pressed against wood, so you can't just walk around firing them wildly. Now, I don't know if he kind of custom designed it, if he tried to remove that safety feature or has some kind of mechanism for locking it in, but in terms of a weapon... In terms of a weapon that you would be using, it seems very unruly. It's not accurate. The nails can't go as far as you would think. If you have, like, I guess a battery-powered one or something, because he wouldn't have one that actually is attached with a hose to a propane tank. Like, that's ridiculous.
We don't know why, Deirdre, but clearly the context may matter here, because we know the FBI has been like concerned about threats to agents following the raid on former President Trump's Florida residence. To be clear again, we do not know the motive here or the situation in Ohio, but after the attempted break-in, police said the man led them on a chase along Interstate 71, which is between Cincinnati and Columbus, and that chase ended in a cornfield near Wilmington. That cornfield is now
USA Today reported that it was
perhaps
also
a crime
armed with an
scene.
AR-15.
We're waiting to see what happens, but we know shots have already been fired. The suspect, a man believed to be from Columbus or in that area, is said to have a gunshot wound to the leg, but he's still mobile. He's contained, but has not been taken into custody.
But what you're describing is certainly a standoff.
An active scene for sure. The interstate in that stretch is shut down, so are nearby roads. The lockdown covers a 1-mile radius. Anybody who lives nearby has been told to please stay inside behind locked doors. And the authorities have brought in FBI hostage negotiators, the Ohio State Highway Patrol, and the local authorities to make sure that this suspect remains remains contained. He was armed, in addition to the nail gun, Deirdre, with an AR-15 style rifle. He's wearing body armor and a...
Why wouldn't you open... Like, you intentionally clickbaited the first part of the story. You were like armed with a nail gun, and 3 minutes later, we'll also add that he had an AR-15, which probably was the weapon he's using, I'm guessing.
Gray t-shirt.
So we can assume, without knowing any details, this was obviously a planned event, at least from his perspective, because you don't just get up in the morning and put on body armor.
It would seem so, but again, the authorities have not given us any indication as to who this person is or what his motivation might be. The Ohio State Highway Patrol has said only in a statement to us that they are on this scene and working it, and that it remains active. Clinton County, Ohio Emergency Management has told us about this lockdown that's in effect, and we are learning from the FBI about the attempted break-in at the FBI field office in Cincinnati.
So, Aaron, I want to pick up on something that you said just a few moments ago, because as you were reporting yesterday, well, since it broke, that the FBI went to the Mar-a-Lago in Florida estate, the Trump estate, we have to, as you said, really underline clearly, we have absolutely no idea if these two incidences are connected, but there has been a lot of anger directed at the Department of Justice, directed at the FBI. There are a lot of people on social media who say that the former president is being treated unfairly, and they wish to target these parts of our government. So we don't know if this is in response to that, but it certainly is a possibility.
We don't know. It is a possibility, I suppose. And the FBI director, Christopher Wray, was asked about this yesterday. He was asked about the raid, and he was asked about the potential threats to his agents. He said he couldn't talk about the raid, but he did say that he is always concerned about any kind of threat to law enforcement officers generally and FBI agents in particular. And a lot of this anger has risen to the surface after the FBI showed up unannounced on Monday morning and stayed for the better part of the day at the former president's South Florida residence. We're not sure what they may have found, what they may have been looking for, or what they may have taken from the home, but sources have told us they were there in connection with a court-authorized search linked to the possibility that the former president mishandled classified information.
I mean, even apparently the judge who signed off on those papers is being targeted, according to social media. It really is all a buzz.
Man, like, the hypocrisy on display, by the way, from the right, they were up in arms because people were protesting out of Supreme Court justices' houses, and, like, peacefully protesting, by the way. Meanwhile, this shit is going down, and it's like, oh, yeah, I mean, par for the course.
Well, it is, and there's been a number of calls for the Justice Department to perhaps say something about why, or about what predicated this search. So far, though, the Justice Department has been sticking to its long-standing policy not to talk about any kind of case until there is a criminal charge brought. And here, there is no criminal charge against former President Trump at this stage. We know there are exceptions to that rule. James Comey famously spoke openly about Hillary Clinton and her use of a private email server, so we're not sure whether the Justice Department is prepared to make a similar exception in this case, despite ongoing calls for the Justice Department to do just that. But we know about the threats to agents. I'm so glad you brought that up,
because the timing of that release as well, many people say, changed the fate of the political course here.
Well, and that's what the FBI has been wanting to avoid, although, again, circumstances may have changed in the country, and there has been something of a clamor from both Republicans and Democrats for the FBI to explain itself. Former President Trump could also release the search warrant affidavit and perhaps give the information himself, although he has so far declined to do that. But be that as it may, that brings us to where we are today, with a man armed with an AR-15 and a nail gun now in a cornfield in Ohio after attempting, for an as yet unknown reason, to break into the FBI office in Cincinnati.
And I'm so glad you brought up as well what the local authorities have told people who live in that area. It must be so frightening for them, albeit it seems as if this suspect is in a cornfield, is more or less contained in this kind of shoot-off situation, standoff situation with local
Fact-based comrade, I see you're still debating about land back. We currently are at a point where we need to actively extract CO2 out of the atmosphere, and to have any hope of meaningfully combat climate change, Indigenous communities are desperately poor. They don't have the capital to invest in those technologies. Land back and Indigenous land defenders, they are the largest defenders of biodiversity on the planet. They make up, I think, close to maybe 8% of the global population, and they're responsible for 80% of biodiversity conservation. They do not, in their own areas, emit anywhere near the amount CO2 that Western nations do. It's not as if they're contributing dramatically to the problem. If you have them protecting land, especially in the case of northern BC, like the Wet'suwet'en people, they are going to be preventing a pipeline from going through there. So they're preventing the expansion of corporations. That's what's happening. It's not as if they are also going to need to be responsible for amassing enormous CO2 carbon capture programs or technology. And that, by the way, seems to be something that people keep pushing, which we need better alternatives than this carbon capture. It's not something that's been proven itself to be able to be scaled up in the way that we need.
Police, but as you say, an AR-15 can do a lot of damage. So people have been advised to just stay home, stay in.
There's a lockdown in effect, according to Clinton County Emergency Management, within a 1-mile radius of this cornfield where this man is said to be contained now. People have been told to stay indoors behind locked doors until the all clear is given. It's not clear how many people may live around there. It does seem to be quite a bit of farmland. They're near Wilmington, Ohio. This is right off Interstate 71. And it's where the suspect driving a white Ford Crown Victoria appears to have led the Ohio State Troopers and the FBI following this alleged attempt to break into the FBI office in Cincinnati.
Aaron, we are going to be dependent on you for updates. Thank you. In the meantime, Aaron Kurtowski, he will be back with us shortly. And obviously, as soon as that conference starts from Wilmington, Ohio.
At this time.
We are also learning that Attorney General Merrick Garland is set to hold a news conference at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, so roughly a half an hour away. Obviously, we will bring you his comments as soon as he starts speaking. In the meantime, ABC News senior investigative reporter Aaron Kurtowski have been following the story closely from Ohio. So, Aaron, you were right beside me here. We were listening in Wilmington, Ohio, to local law enforcement saying essentially that this suspect is contained, but not giving a lot of detail as of yet as to motive.
Well, nothing about motive at all, but certainly the circumstances about what the FBI has faced over the last couple of days, ever since the raid on former President Trump's South Florida home, cannot be far from the Attorney General's mind as he is set to hold this news conference. But in Ohio, there is now an ongoing standoff between authorities and this man believed to be from Columbus, wearing body armor and a gray T-shirt, armed with an AR-15 style rifle and also a nail gun that he brandished when he allegedly tried to break into the FBI Cincinnati office. From there, he led police on a chase along Interstate 71 in Ohio, exiting the interstate.
Fact base. I'm arguing that land back, similar to defund the police, is a politically dead position. There's been monstrously huge land back victories in Canada. That's like stating that any civil rights issue should just stop if it's not going to be politically effective or expedient at any given time.
Somewhere near Wilmington, and as he did, according to State Trooper Dennis Nathan, who we heard from just a moment ago, shots were fired from that vehicle, and more shots were fired and exchanged with officers a short time later. No officers have been hurt. They believe now to have the man surrounded in a cornfield near Wilmington.
Okay, and just to recap, of course, we mentioned that the USAG will be speaking at 2:30, roughly a half an hour away. We do not yet know the subject of what he will be saying.
We don't, and it's certainly possible he may want to denounce such violence as we have seen today in Ohio. He may want to express his concerns, as the FBI Director Christopher Wray had yesterday when he was asked about the ongoing threats to federal agents. He also has been under pressure, Garland has, by Republican and Democratic lawmakers to say something about what predicated the raid on the former president's home in Florida on Monday morning when agents showed up unannounced as part of what sources told us was an investigation into how classified material was handled. Within the last hour or so, the New York Times has reported, and ABC News can now confirm, that there was a subpoena in that case issued by the Justice Department. So there were investigative steps that preceded such an invasive step like
there would
raiding.
Almost have to be, right?
You'd think there would have been, and now we're able to confirm it. And perhaps Garland will discuss that, or perhaps he will say absolutely nothing about that at all.
And to your point, under such political pressure, it seems like Democrats wanted him to be pushing further, faster. And then, of course, we now know there are many on the right who see that raid in Mar-a-Lago as extremely excessive.
Just now, the Justice Department has filed a motion in the Southern District of Florida to unseal a search warrant and property receipt relating to a court-approved search that the FBI conducted earlier this week. That search was of premises located in Florida belonging to the former president. The department did not make any public statements on the day of the search. The former president publicly confirmed the search that evening, as is his right. Copies of both the warrant and the FBI property receipt were provided on the day of the search to the former president's counsel, who was on site during the search. The search warrant was authorized by a federal court upon the required finding of probable cause. The property receipt is a document that federal law requires law enforcement agents to leave with the property owner. The department filed the motion to make public the warrant and receipt in light of the former president's public confirmation of the search, the surrounding circumstances, and the substantial public interest in this matter. Faithful adherence to the rule of law is the bedrock principle of the Justice Department and of our democracy. Upholding the rule of law means applying the law evenly, without fear or favor. Under my watch, that is precisely what the Justice Department is doing. All Americans are entitled to the even-handed application of the law, to due process of the law, and to the presumption of innocence.
Press X.
Much of our work is by necessity conducted out of the public eye. We do that to protect the constitutional rights of all Americans and to protect the integrity of our investigations. Federal law, long-standing department rules, and our ethical obligations prevent me from providing further details as to the basis of the search at this time. There are, however, certain points I want you to know. First, I personally approved the decision to seek a search warrant in this matter. Second, the department does not take such a decision lightly. Where possible, it is standard practice to seek less intrusive means as an alternative to a search and to narrowly scope any search that is undertaken. Third, let me address recent unfounded attacks on the professionalism of the FBI and Justice Department agents and prosecutors. I will not stand by silently when their integrity is unfairly attacked. The men and women of the FBI and the Justice Department are dedicated, patriotic public servants. Every day, they protect the American people from violent crime, terrorism, and other threats to their safety while safeguarding our civil rights. They do so at great personal sacrifice and risk to themselves. I am honored to work alongside them. This is all I can say right now. More information will be made available in the appropriate way and at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Attorney General, the former president
Thank you all for your questions, but as I said, this is all I can say at this time.
He's just so calm, you know. It sounds like Mr. What's his name? Mr. Dressup? Oh, I can't remember his name anymore. And he's just like, no, thank you all. All right, I'm gonna ASMR my way out of this room now, and you have yourselves a nice day. Okay, bye. Scott Adams tweeted this out today. I don't know if it's related. I waited 2 days for my government to justify an FBI raid on a former president's home. I think it was fair-minded of me. No justification has been offered. The presumption of innocence of the government and the FBI can now be removed from the option set. Phase 2 begins. What is phase 2? That's the part where things get fixed. One way or another, all options are on the table, says the Dilbert cartoonist. So, neat. Mr. Rogers. Yeah, Mr. Rogers. That's what I meant. That's what I said. I'm just gonna pretend that's how this went down. All right, so as you all know, Jimmy Dore and the Clown Shoes Left and the People's Party have been going at Nina Turner. Jimmy Dore originally tweeted out, "When lefties cheer on the FBI, you know they're serious about being a Democrat," because his favorite insult is you're a shit lib or Democrat, one of the two. And he's firmly opposed to the idea of lefties trying to run in positions of power as Democrats in the duopoly of the United States because of that very reason. So then, of course, Nina Turner said, "When Jimmy Dore knocks a black progressive woman for pointing out conservatives' hypocrisy when it comes to the FBI, you know he's serious about being anti-black and protecting conservatives." People's Party responds with, the FBI murdered Fred Hampton. It infiltrated the Black Panthers and the civil rights movement. By the way, this is all true. It smeared Malcolm X and told MLK to kill himself. It backed CIA cocaine trafficking into black communities. It just raided the Uhuru movement. Jimmy Dore is not your enemy. The FBI is. And, definitely, why are you lecturing Nina Turner on this? But Nina Turner had also already posted, if they had checked out the rest of the post. Conservatives were okay with the FBI when it came to the Panthers, MLK, and Malcolm X. Now they have a problem with it. If you have a problem with me pointing this out, you're doing the bidding of these conservatives, which Jimmy is. Now, Jimmy Dore has spoken about it publicly on a show called The Convo Couch.
But you got to call someone a racist because they criticized you, and that just shows you that I hit a nerve. She knows she's a Democrat, and this is all first of all, that tweet of hers calling out their right wing's hypocrisy about the FBI. You call out their hypocrisy when they're in the wrong. You don't call out their hypocrisy when they're in the right. You welcome them over to the correct side. If they now start to come on board for Medicare for all, are you going to then flip them off and call them assholes because they used to say they were against it?
Now, here's the thing that Jimmy's really confused of, and he has been for a while, because we've seen him do this exact same line of rhetoric with the Boogaloo Boys. He also didn't do any research on the Boogaloo Boys, which I'm assuming he hasn't done with Marjorie Taylor Greene here as well, because this is what he's thinking. He's like, I've got some goals. My goals are kind of nebulous and not well defined, but I guess it includes just destroying things. And I want to destroy the FBI, either defund it or dismantle it or something like that. And now along comes Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Walsh, Steven Crowder, all these far right Christian nationalists. And they're all saying suddenly defund the FBI because Daddy Trump got raided. And that's why they're suddenly saying these kind of things. Now, are they saying these kind of things, like Jimmy's suggesting, because they both have the same goals? As in, should I now unite with them because ultimately our goals are the same? The answer is, of course, no. What the fuck is wrong with you? What do you think is going to happen here? The Christian nationalists are laying out their plan very clearly. They're being way more vocal about it. They want Trump to get in and to drain the swamp once again. They're like, we want to fire Garland. We want him to get in there and get rid of every single Democratic appointed whatever, or any kind of liberal appointed whatever. And we want to completely reinstate the power of the Republicans and the Republican Party to control the levers of power and state power and government power. This is not suddenly, they're like, oh, well, we're anarchists now. Yes, we've changed our entire political beliefs. You have to also look at what are all the things that they're trying to do. Like some people, and this is definitely where Jimmy Dore is a frequent offender of, he'll talk about identity politics. Identity politics is ruining everything. Why are people always talking about that? Well, one person's identity politics might be another person's civil rights. And if someone is telling you on a regular basis, as Marjorie Taylor Greene and the far right and the Christian nationalists are, that these are the things they're trying to enact. They want to control people's bodies, specifically women. They despise trans people. They want to make sure that trans children are not able to get gender affirming care. They want to control the bodies of trans people as well, and what they can do and their own autonomy, things like that. Now, you might say that it's identity politics to bring those things up, and because they're being very, very vocal and they are actively trying to enact those kind of things through either legislation or through the Supreme Court or through whatever power they have, that is what they're doing with their power. So if you want someone to ascend to the throne, to suddenly gain power, and you help them along the way, which is kind of what Jimmy Dore is suggesting here, then they're not going to get there and suddenly do any kind of lefty shit that you're expecting. It's not defund the FBI for the reasons you think. It's replace the current infrastructure with people who will not go after us.
That's not how this is supposed to work. So they have the right idea now because it happened to them. Like we always say, a Republican or conservatives can't understand a problem until it affects them personally. But we forget that conservatives are the Democrats and the Republicans. So now that it's happened to the Republicans or the MAGA, the Trump supporters, now they'll see. Now they get it. They're like, oh, the FBI is corrupt. So you should welcome them. You shouldn't then keep flipping them off and shitting on them. And that's all the Democrats have. And that's what Nina Turner is. She's a Democrat. That's what her future is. That's what this is about. Her career in the Democratic Party. This is about her career. This isn't about any principle, because if it was about a principle, she would be welcoming those people who are criticizing the FBI instead of.
Nice shades. I wonder if he can see his computer screen. Because, like, if I put on sunglasses, it's fun for a little while, but it definitely, like, everything is now toned down. It's harder to read, right?
Of flipping them off and then doing the cheapest bullshit, hiding behind identity politics. Oh my God, calling out and calling some, hey, you want to disagree with me about the FBI? Let's disagree about it. But she can't do it because she knows she's in the wrong. And so she does that thing. She's the pits, man. How did
It's the pits. So again, Jimmy Dore didn't know who the Boogaloo Boys was. And then when someone went on his show to explain to him, did you know that the Boogaloo Boys, who you have now platformed on your show to thousands of people and said we have to unite with them and that we have very similar goals, that they're actually very progressive, that they are like pro-LGBTQ+, that they are for civil rights, that they are for black liberation, they're for reparations, things like that. Did you do any research on them? Did you know that the whole thing is actually based on a lot of 4chan internet culture, that they have a very large white supremacist element to them, that they are all, regardless if they are white supremacists or not, waiting for an impending civil war? That is a large part of it, and that after that post-civil war, that there's also going to be a race war. Did you do any of that research? Do you know that about them? Because if you're going to platform them and then tell your audience we need to align like with this is our ally because we have similar goals, that's grossly irresponsible. And when it comes to Marjorie Taylor Greene, again, we're talking about a white nationalist here. We're talking about an anti-Semite. We're talking about a woman who genuinely believed that the California wildfires were caused by Jewish space lasers. We're talking about a woman who had to learn that the Holocaust was bad, actually, by going to the Holocaust Museum. That's how she got that lesson. We're talking about a woman who said that she wouldn't tear down Hitler statues because they're an important way of learning about history. Yes, that person. Is that person going to ascend to power thanks to you or your allies and then get in there and defund the FBI and enact all the things you want? Like, do you think that's generally what's going to happen? Or are they going to replace state power infrastructure with state power infrastructure that directly benefits them and Christian nationalism? It's the second one. Like, I'm serious. I swear to God, Jimmy Dore, it's just the slogan alone that's enough for him. He doesn't need to learn anything more about who these people are. He doesn't need to learn anything more about their goals or aspirations politically. If he hears a slogan, and again, I think if he heard, like, if Marjorie Taylor Greene was like, bring back the Choco Taco, and then he was like, I want the Choco Taco too. I love the Choco Taco, and it's not going to be here. He would just go on his program the next day and be like, yeah, they're saying that this is apparently a white supremacist. He's looking to bring back the Choco Taco. It's because of these shit libs. Shit libs won't let you align with this. This is the future.
Put her tweet up there. Show her tweet what she said. She says, when Jimmy Dore knocked a black progressive woman for pointing out conservative hypocrisy when it comes to the FBI, you know he's serious about being anti-black and protecting conservatives. Jimmy, go change your shirt and take your sunglasses off. They're black. Get them off. I don't want to hear about it.
Wait, what? Do you think anti-blackness means literally the color black? What the fuck was that, Pasta? What did you just say? What came out of your lips?
Do you see why the hashtag Me Too, when a woman makes a false allegation, it hurt the man, it hurts all women. And so when she makes a bullshit allegation like this.
Okay, that was like barely a sentence, but do you see the Me Too, when a woman makes a false allegation, it hurts all men? So I guess what you've done there is you've tried to kind of lump in the very small percentage of false allegations, which is most estimates roughly around 5%, lump them in with the entirety of the Me Too movement, which was a lot more than simply a couple false allegations. It was about actually holding people accountable, people who sexually harass others. It applied to all genders, by the way, Jimmy. It wasn't just for women, it was for men too. There was prominent men who came forward and said that, yes, people in positions of power have sexually harassed, sexually abused, or sexually assaulted me. And there was nothing I could do because, again, I was either frightened or they were in a position of power. This stuff goes unchecked. Usually people who happen to be bosses, superiors, people who have more power in society, they've taken advantage of that and used it to sexually harass or sexually assault other people. That's the breadth of the Me Too movement. You don't get to disparage the entire thing because there's a couple of false allegations.
It's pathetic. And that because there actually is racism in the world. And when you call everything racism, do you see why it's easy for the people to dismiss when you call something racism? Because you call everything racist. So according to her, any criticism of a black woman is racist. And do you see how that that's just the wrong message? Do you see how that doesn't help your side? It actually hurts your
He had the same logic when he came to his transphobia, by the way. He had a couple specials where he was just repeating straight up right-wing talking points about trans people. And then he would always preface it with, by the way, I'm an ally, okay? I'm an ally. And if you're going to come after me, who's an ally, well, then I'm sorry. But, like, you're never going to have any success politically. Because at the end of the day, I'm on your side. You just have to do it my way. Like, I'm okay with trans rights to a point. And then past that point, I feel you're getting kind of uppity. There's too much stuff happening. You're gaining too much power. And there's ideology, gender ideology. Why is there so many genders? Why is there so many people reporting that they're pro-LGBTQ plus now? What are trans kids real? What about the prison system? What about sports? Is it not child abuse to give people gender affirming care? Are they cutting off their genitals? That really, but I'm an ally. I'm an ally. Okay. So you just have to understand how you have to do things, and that's my way. It's the same shit with the force the vote stuff, right? Force the vote, regardless of what you think. I'm not trying to start a flame war, okay? Whatever your stance is on force the vote, it's his ego that drives all this. Like, it'd be one thing to have an idea, propose it, and put it out there. It'd be another thing to continuously and repeatedly use this thing to tear the left apart to the benefit of you and your wallet. That's it. Like, I don't believe people when they say that Jimmy Dore is like a CIA agent or all that. I think that stuff is clown shoes internet stuff. It's all for profit. This is all for money.
Side, but she doesn't care about her side. She cares about her career. And so she doesn't care that this actually hurts people when they actually are victims of racism, because when you throw it around so casually like this and such, it's like when they called Bernie Sanders a sexist, right? When Elizabeth Warren said Bernie Sanders was a sexist, it doesn't land. And all it does is it hurts you when you call Donald Trump a sexist, or when you call anybody who actually is a sexist. They go, well, if Bernie Sanders is a sexist and Donald Trump is a sexist, I guess being a sexist isn't that bad of a thing then? Or this is just something you call.
Just so everyone's clear, there's a difference between being a racist, just like an out and proud racist, someone who's like, oh yeah, no, I'm definitely a racist. I believe in racial superiority, all that kind of stuff. Or someone who just goes out and says racial slurs, goes out and says the N-word, and they're very proud of it. Or people perpetuating racism and systemic racism and structures. A lot of people under systemic racism aren't even conscious of the fact that they may be perpetuating these same hierarchies. That's one of the biggest problems of all this.
Everybody that you don't like. And that's exactly what this is. This is Nina Turner being called out correctly, and her flex is...
No, you were wrong, okay? So I think the biggest thing that he's not realizing is that people on the left, myself included, were very quick to start pointing out the hypocrisy of conservatives when it came to all this. And you know, these very people that are supposed to be your new allies, Jimmy Dore, because of course by new allies he means new audience, let's be real. Look, Steven Crowder, it's time to fight for every square inch. Use code FIGHT for 15% off. Oh, okay, so this is the revolution right here. Cool. All right, make me richer and liberate the country. What about Marjorie Taylor Greene, the one who you actually originally got into a tiff about? Oh, what do you know? Marjorie Taylor Greene selling defund the FBI shirts and slogans. Maybe this is trying to cash in on some of you lefties. Now you lefties can go get some merch from the far right, from the Christian nationalists. Get some money, you know? Get a little cash in the process. But that brings me to another important point that we got to talk about, and that is, what is the FBI, after all? It's a series of letters. What does it stand for? And what have they done? And what do they do? Okay. Let's talk about the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The United States Federal Bureau of Investigation is a law enforcement agency that functions as federal police, counterintelligence, and domestic intelligence agency within the United States. The FBI is a division of the Justice Department. FBI agents are armed federal officers with police powers. And now let's listen to their mission statement. FBI has the following mission: to protect and defend the United States against terrorist and foreign intelligence threats, to uphold and enforce the criminal laws of the United States, and to provide leadership and criminal justice services to federal, state, municipal, and international agencies and partners. Their priorities are as follows. Number 1, protect the United States from terrorist attacks. Number 2, protect the United States against foreign intelligence operations and espionage. Number 3, protect the United States against cyber-based attacks and high-technology crimes. Yes, flying dildos and the such. Number 4, combat public corruption at all levels. This one they have not done a very good job on, but that's not the worst thing they've done. Number 5, protect civil rights. Number 6, combat transnational national criminal organizations and enterprises. Number 7, combat major white-collar crime. Another swing and a miss. Number 8, combat significant violent crime. Number 9, support federal, state, local, and international partners. And number 10, upgrade technology to successfully perform the FBI's mission. Now, we have these things called nations. We've got these invisible lines that we've drawn in the sand or this dirt or the ocean or whatever you want to call, and we call them countries. And then your membership in the country is going to be based on whether you were naturalized or born there, or if you're able to immigrate to that country. Certain countries don't allow for that, but we're just going to say that the country of the United States, since the Second World War, has been the world's dominant superpower. No one comes close. The United States has approximately 800 military bases globally, and if you want to compare that to other superpowers, China has between 3 and 4. They have the largest military budget, and as well, the international currency is the United States dollar, meaning that the security apparatus and the hegemonic control of the United States is dependent, because they are the ones that are going to be responsible for the value of the dollar within the country. So if the entire world is utilizing that as the world currency, not to mention the IMF and the World Bank, and no, Caleb Maupin, we're not getting into deep anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. I'm talking about how these institutions also use the United States dollar, loan out large amounts of money to other countries, and then keep them in a form of let's just say economic colonialism is probably the best way of putting it, where they're unable to sometimes get out of the incredible debts that they have to pay back to either the World Bank or the IMF, and the interest on those debts continues to accumulate, and it's just this is how this all works. So the United States is the world superpower. And has been for quite some time, and still is. No matter what you want to say, it's an empire in decline or what all that, that's a different conversation for another day. If the United States and its government oppresses you as a person, and then you want to fight against that oppression, well, then you will become an enemy of the United States. Now, historically, the civil rights movement in the United States, for example, was one that the FBI targeted heavily, as well as leftist movements, whether they be communist, socialist. Well, that's when the FBI was going over heavily individuals with, like, I would say, previously, prior to World War II, they might not have been nearly as aggressive in the pre-McCarthy era, or even if you want to talk about the J. Edgar Hoover era. But who the FBI targets has changed over time. And the idea now being that, hey, the FBI is actually, some people are like, well, they're actually doing their job. You saw this really weird flip, mostly with liberals around the time that Trump was being elected, because everybody, including Mueller, She Wrote, the podcast, were very, very excited that now the security apparatus of the United States was going to be doing its job properly. It was going to take down this corrupt president and his potential dealings overseas and or his potential nefarious purposes within that area. Yeah. Let's talk about the bad things the FBI has done. Covert operations on political groups. COINTELPRO tactics have been alleged to include discrediting targets through psychological warfare, smearing individuals and or groups, using forged documents, and planting false reports in the media, harassment, wrongful imprisonment, and illegal violence, including assassinations. The FBI's stated motivation was protecting national security, preventing violence, and maintaining the existing social and political order. FBI records show that 85% of COINTELPRO resources targeted groups and individuals that the FBI deemed subversive, including communist and socialist organizations and individuals associated with the civil rights movement, including Martin Luther King Jr., and other associates of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and the Congress for Racial Equality, and other civil rights organizations, black nationalist groups, aka the Nation of Islam, the Black Panther Party, the American Indian Movement, a broad range of organizations labeled New Left, including Students for a Democratic Society and the Weathermen, almost all groups protesting the Vietnam War, as well as the individual student demonstrations with no group affiliation, the National Lawyers Guild, organizations and individuals associated with the women's rights movement, national groups such as those seeking independence in Puerto Rico, United Ireland, and Cuban exile movements, including Orlando's Bush Cuban Power and Cuban Nationalist Movement. The remaining 15% of COINTELPRO resources were expended to marginalize and subvert white hate groups, including the Ku Klux Klan and the National States Rights Party. Now, this is where, and 15%, all of it went, this is where it's like, oh, okay, the FBI seems to be doing some good. They're going after organizations that are trying to uphold the hierarchies of white supremacy. Here's the reality of the situation. If the FBI is a direct government institution or branch of the government of the United States government, and the Overton window has shifted, obviously, quite a bit from the earlier days, but there's still not anything close to racial equality in the United States. Think of groups that were marginalized since the inception of the United States. Indigenous people, and then eventually Black people. These two groups have been historically impoverished through a whole bunch of different policy decisions that have been done, and because of the capitalist system that the United States operates under, they've also been indentured in poverty, which, of course, the more capital you have under capitalism, the more power you're going to have ultimately, power to affect politics, power to create jobs, all that kind of stuff. You will have more political power the more money that you have. If you have these groups that are artificially created, that we have grouped together and created these things called races, the white race, the black race, stuff like that, there's going to be different categories that are going to be, because we do live in a society, TM, oppressed by their government. It's going to be harder for them. Enter Nixon. Once the drug war begins, all of a sudden, the number of people who are being incarcerated, mostly people who are black in America, starts to skyrocket, because we have statistics that show black people, white people usually use drugs at around the same rate, but black people disproportionately will have a much harder time with the entire justice system in every single stage, from being stopped more often, from being more aggressively questioned when they are stopped, to being searched without probable cause, to more higher sentencing once they reach the judiciary system, to not being able to afford lawyers, having court-appointed lawyers that are often very shitty and just say accept whatever deal comes your way, to getting stronger sentences when they are sentenced. And this pattern continues and continues and continues into the point now where the United States is the incarceration capital of the universe. The United States has 1% of its population locked up. 1%. Now, if that doesn't sound like a lot, it is. The United States, I think, is the third largest population in the world. They have 5% of the global population and 25% of the world's prisoners. That is astonishing. There has never been an incarceral state like the United States of America in human history. It doesn't matter what, terrible regime you want to talk about in the past. Doesn't matter if you want to talk about the USSR or communist China. It doesn't matter. No one comes close to the United States for mass incarceration. The incredibly other fucked up thing about this is that this system of mass incarceration doesn't even deal with making people into better citizens. It's actually completely punitive. It doesn't care about people once they've left the incarceration system. Those people have very hard lives after that. They have difficulty finding jobs because, of course, they are going to have to state, unless they get a pardon, that they have a criminal record, which limits you to a lot of positions you can get. Very difficult to get an education when you don't have the money to pay for it. All this kind of stuff. It's not about rehabilitation. It's about punishment. And the problem is also in the United States, under the hypercapitalism of the country, it also has a for-profit prison system, that has about 8% of prisoners in the United States in for-profit systems. The problem with for-profit prison systems, beyond, I'm sure, the myriad of things you can already think of, is the idea that there is CEOs, there is people who are making millions of dollars every year by locking up humans in cages. Now, I know the pushback on all of this is going to be like, well, there are bad people out there. What are you talking about, Lance? And we're going to get to that in a second. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that just yet. But I want you to imagine that if you happen to be one of those people in those groups, and I mean, Nixon, that was bad enough. Under Reagan, the age of mass incarceration began to skyrocket. And not only the age of mass incarceration, you have to remember that under the 13th Amendment in the United States, incarcerated prisoners are able to be slave labor. Like, if you're pushed back against that, it's like, well, they're still paid. It's like, a couple cents an hour. It's like, okay, yes, that's what is the semantics of this? This is virtually like, I'm not going to even get into this debate. You are not being paid for the labor you are doing at all relative to the labor itself. Like, they have to do sometimes outdoor labor. It can be grueling and difficult. The fact that that is permitted in an institutionalized system is abhorrent. It's something that should disgust people. Again, we always point towards other countries as being barbaric. And, you don't have to look towards like, oh, this other country apparently, has, they have legal slavery, and this other country, locks up political dissidents for no reason. Yes, those are bad things. I totally agree with you. But have you looked within? Have you looked at what your own country is doing? Have you looked at the fact that, again, the United States has the largest prison population in the world. It has the largest prison population in human history. It has a for-profit prison system that's done in conjunction with its state prison system. That is fucked. Oh, and by the way, Canada, don't worry. We're racist as fuck too. This is not just an American problem. Have you ever wondered or questioned to yourself why Indigenous women make up 50% of the women's prison population in Canada, but make up about 5% of the Canadian population? Have you thought about that? Yeah, we're fucked too. Don't worry. Prisoners are often used to fight forest fires as well. Yeah, that is also incredibly fucked. So anyways, there's a very long history of the FBI doing incredibly fucked up stuff towards its own citizens who they see as being enemies of the state. And if you are being oppressed by the state itself, then it makes sense that you would want to protest those systems that are keeping you oppressed. That is just a natural thing. That is kind of why the civil rights movement has been continuing on as it does. Why numerous civil rights movements happen, by the way. Not just the civil rights movement related to Black or Indigenous people. I'm talking about gay liberation, LGBTQ plus liberation, Stonewall, the fact that these protests were happening because there was a lot of laws against being gay, sodomy laws, it was illegal, that kind of stuff. So there would be people who would have to protest that, and then they would be seen again by the FBI as being enemies of the state. When there was a large movement towards perhaps after the erosion of or the beginning of the erosion of unions, and then that just took off after Nixon, but after there was an erosion of the working class and working power, if there was groups that were banding together saying that we need to get more worker power back in this country, that everything is being sold off, that we are starting to enter a neoliberal hellscape, well, are these people also suppressive? Are these people terrorists? Do these people need to be investigated? Do these people need to be wiretapped? This is one of the reasons why historically, if you are someone who is, I guess, progressive or on the left, you've kind of always identified that the FBI will target you if you are going to be considered or deemed an enemy of the state. Now it's gotten to the point where, finally, and it's very nice, because we went past the neocon era of the Bush administration, so that whole weird period where we were constantly being told that the biggest threat to Americans was Islamic jihadist extremists. That was basically what everyone started to believe, and it did not bear out in the numbers. It was something that other people were saying statistically. We do need to look at the fact that there is a very serious white nationalist problem in this country, and that these organizations, these militias, are very heavily armed. They are organized, and they are prepared to enact violence to get their goals. This is what we should be worried about. Like these are the actual problems and threats. That has shifted since that period till now, at least a little bit. Now it is something that is actually being looked at as a lot more serious, because it's just like a problem you can't ignore forever. But now it has gotten to this point. The FBI raided a social group earlier this week. Yes, they raided a Black socialist group earlier this week. So it's not as if the FBI are suddenly the good guys. It's not as if the FBI, like, this is the weird thing for the blue resistance. They thought all of a sudden it's like, oh, the FBI, these massive government agencies, they're super great, they're awesome. Like, if you are someone who genuinely says that, like, the CIA, for all of its faults, ultimately does good, how can you not love the CIA? That means that you are someone who genuinely believes that America should continue to be the world superpower that is going to, unfortunately, have to suppress and or oppress other countries and the people who live in those countries, and democracy itself for the good of America. And be honest about that, because if you are like, I'm going to be completely transparent. I want America to be the world police. I want America to control basically what takes place in other countries. I want America to enact their will upon other countries. I want them to do a soft imperialism, if you will. But I want that because the alternatives to me are worse. And so this is how I feel. And I think it's completely justified if they're going to upend democratically elected leaders in order to achieve those goals. And if they also want to do some mineral and resource extraction along the way for the benefit and the glory of the American empire, that's okay with me. Be open about it. Be transparent, I mean, the list, if you go to the Wikipedia page, list of FBI controversies, it's very long. It's incredibly long. It's a very long Wikipedia entry. Now, I also want to mention one last thing, if we're still talking about this, because if I say things like prison abolition, people get very, very scared, The prison abolition movement is a network of groups and activists that seek to reduce or eliminate prisons and the prison system and replace it with systems of rehabilitation that do not focus on punishment and government institutionalization. So if you have people who are talking to you about reforming the police system, about reforming the prison system, about reforming the justice system, that they're coming at it from a leftist perspective, they're coming at it from a intersectional perspective, they're coming at it from a ending systemic racist perspective, then most likely this is going to be what they're talking about. The idea of hearing these words, prison abolition, sounds very scary on its surface, because you think to yourself, well, what does that mean? Are you just going to get rid of any ability to stop criminals from being removed from society? There are people who are a danger to society. There are psychotic killers. There are aggressive rapists. There are people who, broadly speaking, will damage society. The United States having 1% of its entire population in prison, a very large percentage of that is drug offenders. A very large percentage of that is people who wanted to get high, and their drug of choice, or the access to their drug of choice, happens to be illegal. The system as it is does not, like, what are your goals? You've made a society. We've created a society, okay? Joker TM, whatever you want to say. We've made a society, and here's what we want to do. We want to have a system that keeps as many people out of prison as possible, right? That should be the goal, ultimately. Not put as many people in prison as possible, keep them out of prison, as in they commit no crimes. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be laws against certain crimes. I'm not saying that, but we don't want to have them in prison. That should ultimately be the idea, right? That it would be worse if there is more people committing actions that we deem to be worth locking them up, institutionally locking them up. That would be it. And if they do commit a crime, if there's a burglary, if there is a robbery, if there is something to that nature, do we want to rehabilitate them? Do we want to turn them into better people? If the answer is yes, if the answer to that is that would be a better system, that would create a more functional society. And guess what? Statistically, it does. If you look at Scandinavian countries that have very different models, instead of punitive justice, they have rehabilitative justice, you get better results. That is simply what happens. That sounds great, but what about the private prisons and the police budgets? True. Also true. We can't ignore that, you know? Some more news on this is amazing. They do a really good deep dive into private prisons and everything, you know, and how that entire idea is completely and utterly fucked. And by the way, I know that a lot of these terms get thrown around. If you hear someone discuss white supremacy, you immediately think of, a KKK member, a neo-Nazi, something like that. If we talk about white supremacy as a structure, if you think about how the United States, and to a different extension Canada, but how the United States came to be, how the riches of the United States came to be amassed, the initial early couple hundred years of slavery. This was a process in which it was enriching only one certain group of people, while the other people were literal slaves. And while this was happening, while they were doing cotton picking in the South and they were doing textiles in the North, there was a large amount of wealth that was accumulated by these different groups. Then, once there was finally liberation after the Civil War, they were promised, 30 acres and a mule, I believe was what the deal was going to be. That never happened. Abraham Lincoln got assassinated. And then we have a new phase where there is this hyper polarization and racism. In the South, we have the veneration of all these Confederate soldiers and all this kind of stuff and culture. And we also have things like Jim Crow laws, which basically create an apartheid system, two different systems of education, different places where white people and black people are allowed to eat or work. Then we have redlining, which doesn't allow black people to be able to get loans and or buy property in affluent neighborhoods. This, of course, is directly correlated with the education system of the United States, because the property value of your homes is what's going to directly fund your schools. You see where I'm going with all this? These endless cycles over and over and over. And I've mentioned this before, even under all these odds, it's pretty incredible that black people were able to do things like create their own Wall Street, until white people burnt it to the fucking ground, okay? And so this happens generation after generation after generation. How does one amass wealth? How does a family have a median wealth amount? Through typically home ownership. And if you look at that, you will see a difference, a disparity between two artificially created groups. These are not real things. These are things we made up, but we differentiate people based on colors because we love them. These two artificial groups, both human beings, you know, there's not like a genetic secret as to why white people have 10 times the median average income than black people do, or sorry, accrued wealth than black people do at this point. And those numbers are getting worse as we go along. So it's not as if racism's over. It's not as if systemic racism has been ended. And when you say white supremacy, it's like, well, what do you mean? Like a structure of that? It's like, what are the majority of politicians? What are the majority of presidents? Who are the majority of CEOs? Are they white men on average? Yes. So they have amassed and control the vast majority of wealth and power in that society. And then it trickles all down from there. That's how the whole like explainer would be for all of that kind of stuff. You can't build a solid system when the foundation is based in racism. Hey, yeah, it's true. It's baked into the cake, as they say. By the way, that goes both ways. That doesn't mean, unlike what the right might be telling you about CRT, that doesn't mean white people are inherently racist. That doesn't mean white people are inherently prone to being slave owners. That doesn't mean white people are any more oppressive or desire to be more oppressive than other groups. Because again, white people don't exist just like black people don't exist as just like the racial categories that we've invented as human beings. People are people. So we have these artificial structures that are perpetuating these systems, which means that we created them, which also means that we can destroy them, which is the good part. Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Juste, we shall spend many a generations building mighty cathedrals in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your oafish jesters, here to offer you a laugh at any opportunity. To our brave knights of the Round Table, Rachel K., Izzy Solidarity, Victoria Bell, Sebastian Demmel, Mark Harmon, Benji Arney, Scary Earthhuman, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood, Everything Important, Hegbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Doug Cady, Daniel Sutton, Jenna Tao, Dark Puppy, Quiet One 85, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multimondi, Trevbot EXE, Brian Ephraim, Anthropophojak, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Ralph Parler, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, La Media Panza, Todd Buckingham, and Todd La Jeunesse. We salute our valiant heroes off to fight injustice everywhere.